I hope you can hear my voice. I would just wait for confirmation from my colleagues that they can hear properly. So good. Okay. So welcome to this webinar from MCBRF Habib. This is sort of an update to an earlier note that we have written towards the end of March, where we reviewed the investment environment and shared our views on it. And given the new developments, given now that we have some information since then, we thought it is good that we can share an investment review with you and share our opinion about it. About the COVID, since it has changed the entire world, obviously there are several implications for our investment markets as well. And about this crisis, I think one of the analysts globally has rightly compared this pandemic with several crises that we have seen by the world over the history. For instance, starting from the depression of 1930s, there is depression here as well. The abrupt crash of 1987 market crash, where market fell precipitately in a very short period of time. Then crisis of 9/11, where the fear around the world was about terrorism, but general fear in the economies, and then the 2008 financial crisis, where both the liquidity crisis and the entire financial markets were tumbled. What I think one difference that is being noted throughout the globe as well is the way, the speed and the scale with which central banks and the governments have taken efforts and counter-cyclical measures to avoid the crisis. The only thing certain in the short term is uncertainty, and the big questions that are unclear right now is when will the world open, and if it opens, would it get worse? Second and third peak notions by some virologists unnerve markets, and despite some progress through remdesivir, a vaccine is still several quarters away. So the whole world is looking at these questions, and unfortunately, there is no clarity about it. The only hope the world is closely following is China, where which has shown huge success in terms of containing the virus and opening up the economy, and the activity there is returning to normal, towards normal in several sectors, in particular construction, real estate, basic raw material, and industrial production. Barring tourism and shopping mall, which gives some clues as to how the future looks like, at least until the permanent cure or vaccine is available. So although every economy is different and their controls in particular, but again, the China, that's why it has become a model that is being closely followed and being closely watched for implementation and the trajectory that the world is going to follow. So in this environment, the new strain, again, recently developed, we have seen heat in relations between China and US, which again puts the whole world at risk with regards to the shape of economic recovery that we are likely to see. Oil markets, we have seen unprecedented movement where spot prices moving to negative zone before recently recovering on the hopes of resumption of economic activity as worlds open up gradually. But the consensus, global consensus among the commodity analysts is that lower for longer is the future, at least for the oil markets. Our economy certainly has been affected, and lockdowns have put strain on every sector, including general public, private businesses, and government finances. We already were facing economic challenges for the last 3 years, and there were signs of some economic stability with a tough period ahead in terms of economic growth in the IMF program. However, this COVID has altered the trajectory which our economy is likely to follow. So lower oil prices, IMF, multilateral agency support, expected debt relief that has been announced by G7, along with lower oil prices, certainly supported us in this environment and our external outlook. The inflation has come off significantly, and interest rates are likely to come down further on top of 425 basis points cut that we have already seen. However, there are still challenges on the economic growth and industrial activity, tech burden, unemployment, fiscal account exports, and remittances outlook. Particular tough would be life after the IMF program comes back to normal reforms and uphill tax targets and debt repayments. Our immediate worries, however, that have particularly grown over the last few days are persistence in the spread of virus and an undisciplined easing that may follow may strain healthcare, and risks are growing for a much slower opening of our economy than we had earlier expected. So the format of session is that we're going to share a presentation with you, highlighting views on asset classes and the overall economy. And we would be able to take questions from you at the end. So for the time being, your mics would be off, and at the end, you would be able to raise questions through the chat box, and we'll try to answer the questions as well. So I will just be sharing my screen, and just give me a second. लोग को आवाज कम आ रही है. So can we have a speak?
I'll try to reach it. इसको अपने screen share.
Okay, I hope the presentation is visible to you. You can see the slides. Can you see the slides? Okay. So now, although we would not want to spend too much time on the data of the COVID, however, to begin with, just to build the context, we'll review few important data points to build the context. So globally, more than 3.7 million people have been affected with a mortality rate of near 7%. However, number of cases in Pakistan, which are still low on relative scale, have started to rise recently. We have seen more than 23,000 cases to date with a mortality rate of 2.3%. The trend on local front still seems unclear as the number of new cases continue to rise at an erratic pace. While globally, most of the developed countries are on the verge of flattening their curve, the local situation remains uncertain. Given the lack of clarity on local trajectory, we expect local economic activities to continue operating below their potential level in the current calendar year. So Pakistan needs to scale up its testing capacity, and in order to gauge the true magnitude of local transmission, currently Pakistan is testing 10,000 individuals almost on daily basis. Now this table shows you the statistics of major economies which were affected with the COVID. And just look at the last column, that from the peak levels, how the spread of virus has changed over the period. So this are not measures the spread of virus. This has peaked, for instance, at a very high levels, but this measures the spread of virus. And as you can see that lately, in the last several days, it has come off significantly, which gives us hope that the globally, at least, the spread of virus has started to peak out, and the curve is started to flatten. However, in Pakistan, if you look at the bottom, it's the improvement is very little. Although the overall number is still very low. However, the persistence in this spread is the real concern, and I think one of the areas where we need to treat caution. So the young population, a silver lining, the fertility rates of COVID, as you all know, are skewed higher towards aged individuals. And we see this as a silver lining, Pakistan being the more younger country and median age is among one of the lowest in the world. So we have shared some data with regards to the spread, the overall spread of death rates according to the age brackets. And as you can see that it is more concentrated in the age brackets above 50 years or so. And on the right hand side, where we have shown number of deaths per million, although Pakistan per million basis ke upar, because it's a huge population and we hardly have about 25,000 cases. So number of cases per million is very minimal compared to 500 plus in some countries. And death to recovery ratio also, one silver lining is that our recovered population is much higher. As you can see that this ratio, the lower the better for the overall recovery. Cure in sight, currently more than 150 drugs along with 95 vaccines related to COVID are being explored worldwide. Most are existing drugs that are being trialed versus against the virus. The US has given emergency clearance for Gilead Sciences drug remdesivir after a government-run trial showed that it helped clients recover faster. However, still, it's not a perfect cure. It did not significantly improve the survival rates. While some fast-paced work is being done by researchers on drugs, nevertheless, they are now touted as an effective treatment against a pandemic like COVID, unless they improve the rate of survival drastically. A vaccine would be ultimate weapon against the virus and the best route back to normal life. Officials like Dr. Anthony Fauci, the top infectious disease expert on Trump administration's coronavirus task force, estimate a vaccine could arrive in at least 12 to 18 months. So until a vaccine is developed, the world will have to rely on social distancing orders in order to lessen the burden on health infrastructure. Now we come to the macroeconomic landscape so just a snapshot of key economic indicators in front of us, where we have shown GDP growth, our exchange rate trajectory, inflation, and external account and the fiscal deficit. So this year, GDP growth is expected to be negative 1.5%. I think, this is severe drop for a country like Pakistan. Even I think in 68 years history, probably the first time that we are seeing a magnitude of this much negative GDP growth. Similarly, on real terms, since 2018, our economy hasn't been able to recover from touching a peak of 300 billion plus. Economy is likely to still remain by the end of next year near close to 275 billion. The exchange rate is likely to remain relatively under control, where depreciation is likely to be low because of improved balance of payment position that we are going to talk about in detail as well. The real effective exchange rate is also likely to remain as per the government, as per the SBP policy to be subpar 100 or at a normal level. Inflation, where until this year we were expecting inflation of about 11% for the full year average basis, which has come off lately in the recent months, and we expect by the year end close to 8% inflation, 8.4%. While for the next year, because of lower oil prices, because of relatively lesser impact of currency depreciation and lesser inflationary pressures, we expect inflation average to remain less than 6.5%, so close to 6.4% average for the full year, which obviously means some more room for monetary easing. So we have shared interest rates, our projections as well. So average next year we expect 8% policy rate. Currently it is at 9%. On the current account basis, on the current account deficit, we expect the current account deficit to remain within a manageable range. So after touching a peak of close to 6% in FY18, This year, we expect close to remain 2%, and next year again under 2%. Although there is a hit in exports, we have assumed somewhat drop in exports as well, but overall impact is likely to remain within a manageable range. So we are going to discuss these numbers in detail as well as we move forward on the slides. The overall reflection of improved balance of payment position would be in the foreign exchange reserves, where we expect reserves this year to show marked improvement from the last year balance from 7 billion, 7.2 billion to end the year at close to 12 billion, above 12 billion. While the next year we expect the overall reserves to reach to 18 billion. Fiscal deficit is expected this year because of strain on government revenues, the higher government spending to support the overall general population, and the support packages that the government has announced. This would result in fiscal deficit to exceed 9% this year, while for the next year we expect it to remain 6% by the end of fiscal year 21. So the real GDP growth, where I think most of the concerns are with regards to the current environment. Obviously, the outlook of growth remains outrightly weak post-COVID. Given the uncertain local trajectory of COVID-19, we think it will take much time for the economic activities to attain the pre-COVID period. So going forward, social distancing would be norm, causing overall consumption to go down as overall society battles with the uncertainty. We think all the major drivers of gross national income to take a hit, consumption, government spending, and remittances are expected to remain muted. So SVP expects the economic growth to contract by 1.5% in fiscal year 20 and slightly recovering to 2% in fiscal year 21. We remain skeptical of next year target as well. The industry and services sector are expected to bear the primary brunt of lockdown in the country. Both LSM and retail and wholesale trade, which are major contributor to the economy, are expected to feel the pinch of the economic slowdown. Here we have shared some comparison of the growth estimates as well, while given the historical trajectory of economic growth. We are also showing the recent expected numbers as well. But one thing is very important is at what pace the overall economy shows the recovery, and at what pace Pakistan lets its economic activity resume. So the key decision again is how to open up the economy and what phases. We have assumed again that given the current spread of COVID, the government may not have the full liberty to let the life return to normal very soon. So it would take longer. Probably, I think activity would resume would probably in several months by the, we have incorporated somewhat impact, which gives us some sensitivity. So we do not see significant downside risk to the current forecast of close to 1%, 1.5% GDP growth for this fiscal year. However, we see that there are downside risks to the excuse me, to the current projections of 2%, and we think that it has the risk to go below 2% and may touch 1% GDP growth for the next year. This is just a snapshot, just a review of our composition of GDP and major sectors, again, where the economic activity is focused on. So again, some idea is that some sectors will get more affected while some will be less affected. Particularly rural areas, agriculture are likely to remain less affected. So we have shown the breakup of local and rural, split between local and industrial and urban economy. So, excuse me. So we have shown about 23% of our GDP is within the agriculture sector. However, by employment, about 38%. These are a bit old statistics of, I think, fiscal year 18 basis. About 38% of employment is within the agriculture sector, while the other important sectors include industrial and services sector, which would remain at risk to the disruption in the economic activity. So about, we have summarized this here in terms of weights, about 45% of employment, if we assume that it is associated with agriculture sector, and there is no effect of COVID on this activity. So about 40% of GDP seems likely that would not get hit, but remaining portions would get hit with varying levels. So we have shown extremely vulnerable is 12%, but 20%, another 20% is sure. Sure, I'll just use this so that you can hear my voice better. I hope this helps improve the audibility of my voice. So about the composition of the GDP and its vulnerability with respect to COVID, as you can see, that this analysis is very important in drawing conclusions about the trajectory of economic growth. This is a snapshot of Google Mobility report of Pakistan as of 30th April, almost a week back, which shows significant disruption in economic activity. I think that is something which is already evident. Again, different sectors, including transit, workplaces, showing almost 50% reduction in the movement. Now we come towards the balance of payment figures, where we have shown these charts to reflect the overall current account deficit numbers. We expect exports to fall by close to 30% during the last quarter of this fiscal year. However, we expect global activities to start normalizing by the first quarter of the next fiscal year, while reaching its full capacity in the second quarter. Again, there would be risks with regards to overall COVID. Our current account deficit would be manageable under such a scenario. The recent fall of crude prices provides a lot of cushion to balance of payment, assuming average crude oil prices of $40 and a remittance decline of close to 15% from GCC countries. The impact on CAD would be a net positive, and we expect current account deficit will remain in the range of 1.5 to 2% of GDP, which is below historical average. So given the rise in bond yields of emerging markets, the idea of raising money through Eurobond is likely to be shelved and looks impossible. Also evident through the increase in the Eurobond yield in front of you, as you can see, about close to, it has hit a high of 9.8%, used to be around 5% back in December, which is showing again the perception of risk among the international investors for the emerging market risk. The debt relief announced by IMF, G20 countries, and multilateral institutions will provide a breathing space at a time when it is difficult to raise financial flows from the global market. Alongside the rapid financing facility from IMF and additional financing from multilateral institutions, we expect foreign exchange reserves to increase going forward. Now, these are the detailed details of projections of our external account, which again have implications for our foreign exchange reserves, our exchange rate, and interest rates as well. So we have assumed somewhat drop again, somewhat impact is already taken in the fiscal year 20, and on that base, we have taken some impact on fiscal year 21 as well. So our overall current account, as you can see, is likely to remain in the range of close to $5 to $6 billion. While we have somewhat taken impact of relief in terms of debt repayments as well, our total gross external financing requirements are likely to remain. Most portion for this year has already been paid, and for the next year, close to $8.5 billion. So we have assumed, again, still lower levels of FDI, but again, there would remain a risk depending on the COVID levels. And again, the normal financing arrangements, we have assumed that they would be rolled over. So overall basis, our reserves are likely to increase by this year, likely to remain close to 12 billion, while likely to touch 17.5 billion by the end of next year. That is why, which gives us some comfort on the pace of currency depreciation. We think that is likely to remain limited.
The current account deficit and overall fiscal balance we have already discussed. Now we come towards inflation and interest rates outlook. So the CPI for the current year is expected to average close to 10.8% against 6.8% last year, owing to lagged impact of currency depreciation, along with a rise in food inflation. However, with declining international crude oil prices, along with an expectation of stable currency, we expect headline inflation to ease off in the next year and decline to an average of close to 6.4%. We have assumed crude to average 35 in this assumption, while the interest rates have already been reduced by 425 basis points during the current year to 9%. We expect further easing of 100 basis points during the year. However, if the pandemic puts more than expected recessionary pressures, we cannot rule out a 2 to 3% further cuts in the interest rate going forward. On the fiscal side, the COVID outbreak would put a halt on reform process and divert government attention towards taking relief measures in the short run. The debt sustainability ratios will continue to deteriorate in the short run as the government overruns expenditure and at the same time faces significant shortfall in the tax collection owing to reduced economic activities. We expect fiscal deficit to clock in at 9% of GDP compared to our earlier estimate of close to 6.9% of GDP. We have assumed further revenue shortfalls of close to 1.5% of GDP, while net expenditure overruns due to emergency spending will be further 0.6% of fiscal deficit. So primary balance will clock in at minus 2.4% of GDP against the IMF target of 0.6% of GDP. For the next year, the IMF has revised down its primary balance target to minus 0.3% against earlier target of generating a surplus of 1%. We think it's a tentative target and could be revised by IMF going forward by looking at the overall economic activities. So next year would be challenging as overall weak consumption would put pressure on tax targets, and if we push to achieve primary balance target, the IMF's final, although numbers are still awaited in terms of targets, but 0.3% we expect somewhat cut in the development spending. Alongside, government will have limited room to provide stimulus via expanding social safety nets if there are any conditions posed via restrictive primary balance targets. So this is the snapshot of the pre and post-COVID fiscal year 20 situation. We expect fiscal deficit to exceed from minus 3 trillion to 3.8, and as a result of that, about 9% of fiscal deficit, 9% of GDP we expect this year. While for the next fiscal year, again depends on the IMF targets and which are yet to be announced. We have taken the current number at primary balance while targeting the primary balance of at minus 0.3%. Now coming towards the capital markets, overall the current valuations of equities are nearly 1 standard deviation below their historical averages in terms of price to earnings ratio. The most important variables that define the valuation of equities are earnings and interest rates. While interest rates have an inverse effect, and lower interest rates should be positive for equities, while earnings and valuations are directly proportional. So given the uncertainty looming over the economic outlook, there are serious question marks on the earnings factor over the short run. On the flip side, the easing interest rates have also improved the relative attractiveness of equities and an asset class. The risk premium is currently close to 5.6%, which we measure by the difference between 10-year bond yield and earnings yield. So 10-year bonds are under 8%. And the earnings yield is at least 5.6% higher, nearly close to the level that we saw during the financial crisis of 2008 and 9. Having said this, we take our estimate of earnings yield with a pinch of salt, with a lot of uncertainties surrounding the outlook on corporate earnings. A weak aggregate demand should be on our way, which could further take a hit on demand of cyclical sectors. The focus should remain on companies with robust balance sheet, with operations in the defensive sector. Further, we believe that a micro view of sectors and stocks will be important this year. Investment selection should be focused on companies which trade at deep discount to their intrinsic value. Moreover, focus should be shifted on companies that are expected to exhibit stellar earnings growth over the medium term. Since the outbreak of COVID-19, various variables have changed, which in general have taken a toll on corporate earnings. So crude oil prices have dropped significantly, while more than expected easing in interest rates have caused banking spreads to shrink and their resulting profitability, while most of other sectors would be hit by reduction in aggregate demand and weak consumption. So we have done some analysis with regards to the impact on the current fiscal year, that is FY20 earnings, and the next year earnings as well. And as you can see, in this fiscal year, because 9-month results are already out and likely to show more effect, more pronounced in the next quarter only. So the impact is more visible in the next year, where from our previous estimates, the earnings now look about close to 12% down from our earlier estimates that we had for the fiscal year 21. So which has, again, even despite this earnings drop, where we are assuming close to 15% earnings drop in the next fiscal year, despite this earning drop, the post-COVID price to earning valuations are showing again the market at again discount and cheap. So close to this year basis, close to 6.1, while 7.1 times the price to earnings ratio. Again, these are, again, we have been conservative, and currently I think most estimates are not incorporating the impact of COVID right now and will be revised downward going forward. But we have assumed this impact, and that's why our market price to earnings ratio for fiscal year 21 may look higher than the general street estimates. So now, again, approaching towards the attractiveness of equity market and the case for investment. So again, since interest rates is going to be one theme where we are likely to see more interest rate cuts as well. So we have done some analysis where we have tried to split or arrange the history according to interest rates and P levels. So we have divided, rearranged the overall PE levels and where the interest rates were lower. So we have divided the history into two groups. One where interest rates were lower and close to 8% range, 9% range, and the periods where interest rates were higher than 9% and were approaching in this period. So as you can see, these black dots are indicating that the period where interest rates were lower, the price to earnings ratio were above 9 times on average basis. On average basis, this looks like about 11 times, while on the right hand side, if you look at this pocket here, where the overall interest rates were above 9% and approaching toward 12%, the price to earnings ratio took a dip, and generally the average price to earnings ratio were above were below 9 times, so 8.5 times. In this context, again, right now, as we discussed earlier, that our valuations are close to 7.1 times, and with more expected easing in the interest rates, depending on the COVID situation, but at least 100 basis point, if you assume the 8% policy rate, then this indicates that our P has more room and the market is attractive on that basis. These are some of the, now we come to the GDP growth and valuations analysis, because I think two very important indicators in this environment are, one is that we have the interest rates coming down, while the GDP growth is also likely to stall and not likely to be to a very good economic environment in terms of overall productivity and growth. So again, we try to again bifurcate the history and the annual GDP growth numbers into high growth and lower growth numbers. So on the right hand side, on the left hand side, if you could see in this chart, we have shown how the PE ratio was when the GDP growth was lower. So we have selected these periods in fiscal year 9, 10, 19, 11, 13, and 12, where the GDP growth was below 3% or near 3% range on average basis. And if you look at this range, the price to earnings ratio was relatively lower, while the periods where GDP growth was higher towards the right hand side, if you could see, there looks like that a strong correlation is there between GDP growth and price to earnings ratio, which tells you that markets do perform very well when the GDP growth environment is better, and higher GDP growth results in higher PE as well. Although this is limited data, but based on the historical analysis, we are just trying to zero in our view as well with respect to different indicators. So this is again showing that while the average P is 7.4, our current estimates indicate 7.1. So there is little room for downside, but upside should also remain kept as well. In terms of the valuation metrics, market cap to GDP ratios, market cap to M2, this again is showing the valuations are at historical levels, probably closer to market cap basis, even closer to 2008 levels. While on market cap to M2 basis, again, market is again at very low levels. And risk premium, we only saw this much risk premium being priced in the equity markets back in 2008. While discount to emerging markets on average basis has actually expanded and become widened over this period. So average historical discount has been 23%, while current discount has been 35%. The next chart shows how the KSE 100 price to earnings ratio has moved with respect to MSCI emerging market and how the discount has moved. As you can see that when the market fell to its low around March 24, this discount had increased significantly with respect to history, but still on average basis, this discount is still relatively at higher levels. So now if we sum up, most of the indicators point out that market has priced in most of the negatives. However, some indicators suggest that upside would be limited in the short term. We think that market can remain volatile in the next 6 months as there is much clarity needed on COVID. Investors should prefer asset allocation funds in the short run, and any dip should be an opportunity to increase exposure in equities. The long-term valuation indicators such as market cap to GDP are trading well below their averages. If you look at, so we have assumed if the market cap to GDP resumes or reverts toward the average level, then that means there is 70% upside. Market cap to M2, there is about 85% upside. However, I think one real factor which carries weight as well is the low growth environment, where we see risk to GDP growth. So that may put a constraint on the market performance in the short term again, because I think in overall environment, this impact is likely to remain either concentrated to 1 year or until when the vaccines arrive. And hopefully by then the economies would resume their normal trend. So this situation of uncertain environment, as long as it persists, this may keep the valuations in check. However, once the clarity emerges, the upside potential is also huge. So again, this indicates that in the short term, the markets may again move in a narrow range, or would have an cap on their upside. But again, as a long-term investment opportunity, this is still likely to remain an attractive time. Now, about the bond yields in the fixed income markets, again, the markets have been expecting interest rate cuts earlier as well. And that is why you can see that the policy rate has actually lagged behind, and markets have been forward-looking and have been moving much earlier than the discount rate cuts. even now, markets are pricing more than 100 basis point cut in the interest rates and signaling that the SVP would again act to support the economy. Plus, much lower than the earlier expectations, and we expect 6.4% inflation average in the next fiscal year. And with the current environment of low economic growth, this may be one area where we can expect SVP may move further. So this is the review of major asset classes. Again, with regards to risk, as the outlook of COVID is uncertain, we have assumed economic activities to gradually pick up from the next year and to attain the full potential midway in the next year. So any change from the expected outlook can significantly change our macro indicators. Similarly, IMF program would be a challenge. Our inflation estimates are highly sensitive to oil price assumptions, while the overall stability in the environment is also very important. Geopolitical tensions globally have started to rise, particularly with the announcement with the heightened relations tensions between China and US. Yes, probably threatened about certain steps to be taken, but that again poses the risk to the overall economic environment. So this brings us to the conclusion of this this presentation, and we would be happy to take any questions if you have with regards to the overall environment. So you would be able to post the questions through the chat box. We have limited time as the overall environment is concerned. However, we'll try to take maximum questions. So I think for the time being, the questions are with regards to the asset allocation strategy and the portfolio composition. The overall asset allocation, obviously, in the short term, as we said, that the asset allocation funds, we are likely to maintain higher cushion. So we will maintain about 50% equity allocation in asset allocation fund. But as the clarity emerges on the COVID, this allocation is likely to go higher. With regards to the question on sector composition and sectors outlook in the equity market, so we have while the banking sector, because of overall interest rates and the risk regards to performance of non-performing loans, may lag behind. However, currently the valuations in even banking sector are also very attractive. So even based on our conservative estimates, where we have assumed interest rate sensitivity and the risk of further NPLs as well, the price to earnings ratio is undemanding, and the yields, dividend yields, are likely to remain above 10%. So which gives us some comfort in this sector. Oil and gas sector is again, we have been very conservative in making our assumptions with regards to oil price forecast. So at $30 oil prices, the overall price to earnings ratios are undemanding and under 7 times. While fertilizer sector, where the dividend yields are high, are likely to anchor the overall allocation from the dividend yield perspective. Similarly, power sector, where we expect the overall growth, especially in hub power and expansions they have undertaken, are likely to support their earnings going forward. Cement and the other cyclical sectors, we will continue to watch the valuations closely, because in these sectors, again, especially in cement sector, the overall cement prices are more important than the overall trend in volumes, where we expect favorable movement. So we have somewhat allocations, however, still on the overall volumetric demand, we are conservative on this side. With regards to the overall fixed income funds, again, the question is with regards to fixed income funds. We expect returns to, again, I think In case of 1% interest rate cut, we should not see significant drop in returns of our money market funds. So they are likely to remain near close to, I think, current levels. While in the bond funds, again, since the markets are already pricing in more than 100 basis point rate cut, so further rate cuts beyond 125 or 150 basis point, only then we could see more upside in the bond funds. However, again, in the short run, I think the COVID would be very important to follow with regards to bond fund returns as well. While on the credit side, we believe that the general credit quality of the TFC portfolios is also very, I think, comfortable in the overall industry. Generally, the overall composition of the portfolios have been on the better credit quality side, and should I think support in terms of the income fund returns, which where most TFCs are linked with 6 months KIBOR, and should support the drop in interest rate, and income fund returns are likely to remain higher in the short term. So these were the few questions with regards to asset allocation and composition. I think have most of the questions were about asset allocation and our outlook. And with regards to the long-term outlook, as I've cleared that, again, this uncertainty, this corona impact may hit this year, may continue to hit earnings this year. However, once it is over, or once the economic activity is resumed, this is likely to open up the upside. In the short run, however, the uncertainty would continue to keep it on. So this concludes our session. Thank you very much for being online and patiently listening to our presentation and our views. We would be looking forward to your feedback and sharing your views further in the future as well. So thank you very much.